Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 prop and betting live stream for the Genesis Invitational. Any questions you've got down there in chat, we'll go ahead and go over here in this live stream, as well as all the info you need heading into lock and some exposure on Underdog Prize Picks, as well as some free ball and matchup bets you might want to keep an eye on over there for Friday. But hopefully your Thursday's treating you guys nicely and you're ready to talk some golf over here for tomorrow. We got Joseph down there, a new name, and Call Saul down there in chat. Gotta say, gotta love, gotta call Saul, one of my favorite shows that you have out there. And yeah, hopefully you guys are having a great night. And like I said, any questions, feel free to go ahead and throw those down in chat. We're going to go ahead and hop right on in, not waste any time whatsoever. So in terms of your stat averages from today, they're going to be pretty useful out there for tomorrow, because not to get too far ahead of ourselves, this weather forecast looks pretty similar to what you had for today, maybe a slight tad bit easier, but in general, a lot harder than what you'd have with calm conditions. So it played about 2.28 over par. If we split it by morning versus afternoon, though, there was a tale of two halves. In the morning, it was playing closer to a +1 scoring average, but as the rain came in the afternoon, also the wind gusts went to closer to 25-30 miles an hour. It went from a +1 scoring average to a +3 scoring average for the last half of tee times. And by the way, that split was like 1.7 shots from one side to the other, was only with a 1 hour difference of tee time. So it was truly like a 9-day difference when that weather came through. So though it played 2 over par overall, I think the first half average, where it played closer to 1.4 over, is going to be a little bit more spot in line for tomorrow. Now, when you add on top of that the wind gusts look a little bit less significant, they're going to be closer to 20 miles an hour over on this HRRR model. If you take a look at some of the other ones on there as well, the sustained winds look a tad bit calmer than what we had out there for Thursday. And when you add in the fact that they're not expecting nearly as much rain during play, I think these averages are going to improve at least a little bit, if not a whole lot, probably at least about a half stroke across the board. So your birdie average, I would expect to go up to maybe like 2.6, 2.75 per round. Your bogey average, I would expect to go down quite a bit. So that would probably be at most about 4 per round. Hence why I think the scoring average should be closer to 0.5 over to maybe an entire stroke over par. So also the pin locations, worth noting from that perspective, were pretty tricky out there for the first day. You heard the official come on to the broadcast on ESPN Plus and mention that they wanted to have them all high and dry, which if you haven't heard that saying before, they try to put them on high spots of the greens when it's going to rain a whole lot so that you don't have any sort of drainage issues, right? If you're putting them down in a bowl or on one of the lower parts of the green, you're going to have a lot of water that will pile up on that area. And I know it wasn't a massive issue. They didn't have to stop play today because of some of the rain, but if they had put them in some of the lower spots, they might have had to think about doing so. And the other part of that, and you had to really watch play to be able to notice this, is when you have high and dry pin locations, they're putting them on the highest spot of the green. That is almost always the most difficult pin location. And it's easy to think about. When you have the highest spot on a green, that usually means that everything is sloping away from it. And if you're thinking about a par 3, right, especially when you're trying to get up and down to the high spot of a green, that is oftentimes the most difficult pin location. And while we didn't have them drop a pin sheet quite yet, at least as of now, look at that, 30 seconds ago, it's like they know via telepathy. They go out there and give us this pin sheet. I can already tell you, looking at hole 2, that's a low spot pin. Hole 3 is a low spot over there in the front right. It doesn't look like they're nearly as worried about this rain coming through. So to circle back to the weather forecast, because in this HRRR, I mean, it's calling for all the rain overnight, it'll probably still be lift clean in place because they're getting about a half an inch, maybe even a little bit more than a half an inch of rain overnight. But during play, they're not going to have that same kind of risk. So, I mean, we're going to go through these pin locations hole by hole, really give you guys a good taste for what they're going to be facing. But I imagine that they're going to be a whole lot easier. So that combined with the fact that the winds don't look nearly as bad, the fact that it's still probably going to be lift clean in place, has me thinking that the scoring average might even get a little bit easier than that 0.5 to 1 stroke over par. So let's go through these pin locations. Let's do a full deep dive now. But I was hoping we'd get pins to go through, because those high and dry pins, as they were calling them via the rules official, looked really tough today. And I'm interested to see if they changed them up at all. Let's go. Let's roll the rock. Absolutely. What's going on? You said Cell killed you. I don't know who you're talking about, but hopefully it wasn't too bad, dude. Frank says you still see Rory bouncing back. You know, his birdies weren't on today. Yeah, I mean, he played well. He shot like even or 1 over par and had a better than average round. So I don't know if I would really say that, Frank, if it's like a bounce back. Like he had a good round. It was just tough conditions. Not everyone's going to hit their prop, right? Let's use our brain for a little bit. So let's go through this. Over here on the left side at hole number one, first round, it was over here on the right side. I wouldn't say that this is really an easier pin location. In fact, compared to this round one pin over here on the left side, it might be a hair more difficult, but it's not going to be drastically different to today. It might be a slightly harder up and down if you short side yourself in this bunker, but it's going to play to about the same kind of scoring average as it was playing into a massive wind today. So they gave him an easy pin location because it was playing directly into the breeze. So with it getting a little bit calmer, the pin location might be a hair more difficult, but it'll play easier conditions wise as it won't be nearly as much wind. Go to the next hole. Hole number two is over here on that front right. As I mentioned, they had it on this top left corner. Again, high and dry was the name of the game when it came to the pin locations today. Tomorrow, it's over here in the front right corner where you do have a little bit of a backstop working through the middle of the screen. But in general, it's an easier pin location because if you miss the green or even putting, like, I mean, I know Denny made his putt today, right? He made the 6-footer right there. But this was a tough 2-putt. And you had them from the front of the green. They're running super slow. You have this whole slope that you have to putt over. It's a dicey proposition. So this front right pin location, I'd expect to have a much better scoring average. Hole three is on this front right side of the screen. It's in the low area, as I was mentioning before. You have the slope towards the middle that'll help you run it closer to the hole and maybe even a little bit of a backstop as well. Now, it's worth noting that because conditions were projected to be so hard, that they did move up some of these tee boxes. So, for example, here at hole number three, this is one of the tee boxes that they moved up. So it's over here on the front left. They could play it the whole way back here. So if they choose to do so, it's still supposed to be playing into the wind. You do have, actually, the wind direction looks a little different tomorrow. So I'm not so certain it's going to be directly into the wind. It looks like a little bit more of a side wind out here for round number two. So yeah, they might play it to the back tee box if it's going to be a side wind as opposed to into. So even from the back tee box, I would say it's an easier pin than today because once again, it's in the high and dry spot there in the back corner. Next up, we have hole number four, which is going to be a front left pin location. This one is the easiest pin that you have at this hole. They played it fully tipped out today as it was playing downwind. So you can see, right, the farthest back tee box is where they had it. And this pin for today is much easier than what you had for round number one. Round one, it was there in that back peninsula, really hard to putt if you hit it towards the front side of the green. And now you're going to have a little side slope to work it closer to that hole. Hole five is a middle right pin location. Once again, an easier spot than today. It's a little bit shorter and it's pretty close to where that number three is. So you can see that slope to the left side of that pin is only going to help you get a little bit closer. Hole six is a front middle pin location. This is super easy. I mean, this is the easiest pin that you could possibly get. It's in the front here. So if you miss short, like a lot of people will, it's the most straightforward up and down that you could possibly think of. Now for eagles, I would say that it's about the same as round number one. You can see that this little slope here, again, high and dry pin locations. I'm going to continue to say it. This is another reason I think it's going to play easier for tomorrow. I mean, look at the putt. I mean, look at the slope that you had to putt over to get to this pin. Now it's on the low area and your chips are going to be a lot more straightforward, but you're also going to have a better chance of having, if you hit it to like 5 to 6 feet, you're going to have a better chance to do so to this pin location than where you had to control your spin over that little bit of a ledge. Hole 7 is a middle right pin location. So it's over here kind of close to the bunker. I would say it looks a little trickier than today, but not that much different. Like the reason I say it looks a little harder is because you're short-sided to this bunker. But in terms of like your birdie average, I don't think that changes very much. I just think you might see a slightly more bogeys over there at hole number 7. Hole 8 is a front left pin location. This is the easiest pin that you have at this hole. This has the backstop behind it and even a little bit of a slide slope to the right. So I can already tell what they're doing, right? They got hit over the head today with the conditions. They're trying to throw them a bone tomorrow. And it's not a complete bone because you're still going to have some wind out there. But from the pin location perspective, I mean, it's just 9-day difference out there from yesterday. Hole 9's a par 5. This is probably going to be hard to reach into once again. It's not going to be directly into the breeze like it was for today. I mean, that's why it was a true 3, even 4-shot hole for some players. But with this front pin location, see there at hole number 9, or I guess it's closer to middle right pin location. So over towards where my cursor is right now, it looks easier to get an iron shot closer to. And if you're trying to get up and down to it, it's also an easier pin location. Just like almost every pin that we've gone through, it was up on a ledge today, right? Just over this huge slope in the middle of the green, which made it hard to get up and down if you missed short. And it also made it a hard 2-putt if you missed towards the front side of that green. Hole number 10 is a back right pin. This one looks a little trickier than today. So, right, they're not all going to be easier pin locations. This one today was front. You did see people spinning the ball back and getting it close, but this back right pin, I don't think it's hard, right? It's not protected by any bunkers back there. It's pretty much wide open, but it is a slightly longer shot in. So, maybe a hair harder if we're nitpicking. Hole 11, is going to be in this front right corner. I would say that this is the easiest pin by far that you have at this green. And if we had firm greens, it'd be a little bit different. Like when we played the Farmers, for example, when we had this pin location on the front right, the conditions were much firmer. So when we did this breakdown, I don't remember which round it was over there at the Farmers, but we did have this front right pin location. I said it was a little bit harder because you didn't have that much room to hit it close. But because the greens are super soft after all the rain that they've done, this will be an easier pin location. Hole 12 is a middle, it's like kind of middle front pin location that you have over here. This one will be easier than what you had for today. It played a whole 480 yards the whole way back there. So if they keep the pin, let me see what they did with the tee box. Yeah, so they moved it up one tee box. If they keep the tee box moved up by one, this pin location is going to be a whole lot easier. But even if they move the tee box back, the difference in the tee boxes is about the same distance that you have from this pin to the other. So I think that worst case, it plays about the same as today, if not a slightly chance to be easier if they end up moving that tee box again. Hole 13 is a par 5. It's over here on the left, kind of similar to today where it was up on top of the shelf. So this green's a trough. It has a low spot in the middle. They had it over on the right side for round 1. Round number 2, it's going to be on the left. So I would say not really a huge difference when it comes to the scoring at that hole. Hole 14, or at least pin location wise. 14, we got a back right pin. This is a tricky one. It's another one of those on top of a shelf pin locations. So the front 9, it really looked like they're trying to give a player a bone, right? Trying to make it a little bit easier. There are a few tricky ones here on the back. In general, they look easier than round 1, but like 14 is an example, one that might be slightly harder. Let me get a sip of water. Jeez Louise. Throat is getting dry over here. So let's go to 15 next. So 15, it was moved up a tee box today. So you can see back there, they do have one other tee box to go out there and work with. Maybe they move it back over there for tomorrow, but the pin location looks pretty similar to today. It was towards the front. Instead of front left, it's going to be front right over there for tomorrow. So I would say the same kind of pin location, but the scoring average here at 15 is really going to come down to this tee box. If they move it back, it might get a little bit harder. If they keep it at the same spot, the scoring average probably gets a little bit easier, right, with the lower winds tomorrow. Hole 16 is going to be a back left pin location. It's not really back left. It's more like back left middle towards where my cursor is right now. Definitely a little bit trickier than today, but what they usually like to do with this kind of tee box is I got ahead of myself. What they like to do at that kind of hole location is move the tee box around, and it's not always making it shorter. Here at hole number 16, they'll sometimes use these side boxes. Like you can see, they have a little bit of signage over here at this tee box. If they use this one, it'll play a little bit shorter than what you have there in the back, but the actual angle into the green is a little bit more difficult. So I'm kind of curious what they're going to do there at 16. I think there's a good chance that they move the tee box, at least based on the pin that they're using. Hole 17 is going to be a middle right pin location. So it's up here on this shelf. Looks like pretty similar to today, I would say. The thing that made today's hard is you did have a slope to the left of it that took balls away. And then finally 18, we have one in the back left corner. So this back left corner, it's another high spot like round number 1. So I don't think it's really going to change all that much when it comes to the scoring average, but it might be slightly harder. And the only reason I say that is you do have a little bit of a slope in front of that hole location. So it played directly downwind today. It's going to be more of a side wind tomorrow. So I think the scoring average is 18. This is going to be like the one hole that I think will actually play harder. Like even the ones that had slightly harder pin locations, like as I mentioned, with the lower wind and the wind being more on the side on most holes, like I think it's going to play easier in general. So even those tougher pin locations are going to be easy compared to today. 18, though, this is the one that I think could be a little bit harder because the wind isn't going to be helping you as much as it was for round one. And then this little slope, you'd be surprised, can be a lot more troublesome than you think. Now, when you're coming into the green with like a 3-wood, something like that, let's say you're going forward in 2, it's not a big factor at all. Like if anything, the issue is when you're hitting a wedge you can spin the ball back off that slope. And then if you're trying to get up and down, like let's say you're like front right of the screen, right? A little short of it or something. It's a pretty difficult chip, right? To hit it over that slope and try and get it to stop. And then anything short, you're also dealing with that slope. So that's the only reason I think that hole in particular might be a little bit harder. But to bring that back to our stat averages, yeah, half a stroke to a stroke over par is what I'm expecting, which I know that sounds rather optimistic, but keep in mind that the scoring average for the first half of today was only 1.4 over par. So, right, that's only a 0.4 shot difference than what you had for today. And even those first half starters, they had some rain and wind kicking up. So it's I think there's good reason to go out there and say so. Let's catch up on chat and let's go through some props. Damn, Arda correct. You said Sep killed you. I hate to hear that, dude. Luckily, I had 0%, so I was not a victim of that, but I hate to hear that for you. Let's go through a few props on here. So you can see I was looking at a few over here on Underdog. 2 props that I was going to go ahead and give you, but unfortunately, the Scotty Scheffler one ended up moving on us. So I do have a few others that I was looking at, but I do like this Victor Hovland under on strokes. Now that I've seen the pin locations, which by the way, I wasn't able to go through when I ended up entering that slip. Now I feel even better about that. So it was an under at 71.5 strokes on Scotty, which if you take a look at the sportsbook odds, Hovland is minus 130, as we'll talk about here in a second. But so was Scotty Scheffler. He was also minus 130 versus the under, as you can see there over there on Draftkings. Now he's also minus 130 for his over on birdies. So the payout is slightly lower. So on Underdog, for whatever reason, they do give you a slightly lower payout if you're using a birdie or better prop. But it's a 0.17 difference when it comes to your unit. So it's really not the end of the day to go out there and play that sort of prop. And let's see what they have Scotty at over here. So yeah, it looks like they don't have any Scotty at all over there on the PrizePicks board. So I like that they're going to have more selection for us over here on the PrizePicks side. But on Underdog, these are my main 2 props that I would like now. Obviously, the 71.5 on Scotty was the one that I played and that I gave to my Patreon members, and they were able to lock in. But in terms of other props I was looking at, there was another 73.5 I was looking at. Who was it? Let me just scroll through and find it. I can't think of who it was off the top of my head. Yeah, it was Wyndham Clark here. That was also minus 130 for the under. Just like those other 2 that we've already gone through. Wyndham Clark here, you can see, is also minus 130 for the under. Now, I thought that the sportsbook pricing actually looked a little bit like higher than it probably should be. Like, I obviously think it's going to play closer to like a stroke over par. At least that's what I thought when I went out there and entered that slip. If it's only going to play like a half a stroke over because of these easier pin locations, like I think that this board is priced too high. So I know Clark's minus 130 under, same thing with guys like Hovland, but at least where I project the board, they should be even better value than that in my opinion. So that's why I would like those 2 as leans. I haven't entered the Wyndham Clark one quite yet, as the only slip I've entered was that Hovland and Scotty Scheffler one. But I think that those are all live plays for sure. So that's over there in Underdog. Those are 3 props that you can enter. And also, I guess I'll go over this with Rory. Rory's minus 135 for his over on birdies. So, go with whatever combinations you want. This 4-man would be terrible. Do not enter that for 4x. That is just dog shit. Hell, even this 3-man for 4x is dog shit. So obviously try and find some pairings where you can get a little better payout. And hey, maybe you can find a fade to go out there and mix in. If you mix in a fade with any of these, you'd be getting a whole bunch of value over there as well. Of course, right? All of my exposure is going to be posted on the Patreon page, but of all those props we went over, like this Rory over on birdies and whatnot, there's a good chance I'll be entering all those props down towards the bottom. Like in particular, let me get we already had the Wyndham Clark one in there and this Rory McIlroy. I'll be adding those 2 for sure. And then who was the other one? I guess this over in Scotty, like I know I have his under on strokes. The reason why I like the under on strokes more, like I could see him only making 1 or 2 bogeys and then making 3 birdies and still covering that 71.5. So that's why I did like that strokes one a little bit more. But, in terms of the plus EV value, when you're looking at the sports books, it's equivalent out there from prop to prop. So it's not that big a difference. It's just to show you the birdie lines, because I know I didn't show you those before. And when I cited them as minus 130, look at this, like Scotty Scheffler's minus 130, and then Rory McIlroy, he's minus 135 over here. But where's he at? There he is, down there towards the bottom. You see is over there at minus 135. So that's why I was pointing those ones out. it's interesting to see that Scotty is at 71.5 over here in PrizePicks. So yeah, if you were going to enter anything, this 71.5 is definitely the one that I prefer. And just to give you guys the idea, like he's an elite bogey avoider. I mean, like the best of the best. Even if he makes 2-3 bogeys out there, you know, he makes 4 birdies, he covers that way, right? But if he only makes those 1-2 bogeys, like I think is pretty likely for Scotty, then, you know, he only has to make 3 birdies to go under that sort of line. So that's why I liked that one a little bit more. And then what I noticed is that we have a lot more options over here for birdies. And I think the average is going to go up. Like it's going to be at least 2.75 per round, at least in my projections. There's definitely going to be some value to be had. So just kind of going through these first glance, like a Pendrith kind of sticks out. He's a high birdie percentage player. Somebody like a Sanjay is a high birdie percentage player, at least compared to some of the other guys here on the board. And then look at the strokes board too, because I haven't had a full chance to look at this either. So like a Fitzy at 73.5, like that doesn't seem like a terrible under. Like I'd be pretty picky about it, right? It's not like I take just anyone over here for an under at 73.5, but like a Mav McNeely, like he's a half decent player, like especially recently has been playing some pretty good golf. Like I know Pendrith went over by 0.5 today, but like I'd go right back to that. Like I know we looked at that 3 birdie line, but 73.5 strokes, like he'd be another kind of player that I'd be looking at for an under. Yeah, like whether it's Underdog Prize Picks, whether it's the sports books, I don't think that they've accounted for the pin locations. And not everyone goes as deep as I do, right? They don't go through all these pins. They don't really look at the differences between them. These pin locations are way, way easier than what you had for round number 1. You combine that with the conditions not being as nasty, right? It's going to be warmer, right? It's going to be closer to 58, 60 degrees as opposed to like the 48, 50 degrees that it was for today. All of that matters, and all of that is going to make this golf course easier. So over here on the PrizePicks side, I definitely like that Scotty Scheffler prop. And if I was going to pair it up with anything right at this second, I'd say look at that. Hovland actually already bumped down 0.5 over here. What would I mix it in with? I guess that's a good question. And so I'm going to find something here in PrizePicks to give you guys as well. I'm just brainstorming right now, so don't mind me. Let's throw in the Sanjay one to brainstorm. Let's do the same thing with Pendy, as I was mentioning before. And then actually might want to put the 73.5 for Pendrith in there as opposed to the other one. Let me see what they have for Sahith on a line. I thought he was even money. So yeah, even money about over there at 73.5 strokes. So I wouldn't call it a quote unquote plus EV value, but I don't think that's the worst prop. And then I don't think they had anything for Pendrith, but let's see. So yeah, nothing at least on DraftKings when it comes to Taylor Pendrith. Let's see if that's the case on, also the case over there at Fanduel, which I can't say is surprising. They can't post everyone on the board. And in an elite tier event like this, you know, guys like Pendrith have to get cut out, unfortunately, which, you know, there are plenty of events where Pendrith is going to be on the board, so we shouldn't complain about it too much, I guess. So, yeah, I like the Scotty one. That's definitely going to be the one we include over here. Like there are some plus EV overs, by the way, that you can mix in as well. I think conditions are going to be easier than what these books think. But like if you were looking at the sportsbook odds, like a Fleetwood is minus 140 for the over. Who else is at that number? Like Cantlay is also minus 140 for his over. Ludwig Gobert, he's at 72.5 on books, right? He's minus 140 for the over. I think while a lot of your plus EV bettors are going to go like, ooh, let's take those on PrizePicks, right? It's a pretty decent line. I think it's a trap. I 100% think it's a trap. If I'm right about my lean on conditions, then it's a trap. Those guys shooting even par or better because you're going to see a good amount of those guys do that. If that's the kind of condition set that we get, I'm torn. I'm torn between these two because like Sanjay at 3 birdies, I really like. He's a decent putter. He played really well when he was here at the Farmers, right? He almost won the event when they played it. So I know Sanjay didn't have the best round number 1, but you know, he looked really good a few weeks ago here. So he's the kind of guy, right, I'd be considering. By the way, he made 3 birdies today when conditions were even harder. That included only 1 birdie on a par 5. So, you know, he was pretty dialed in with some of those irons on the par 4s. I kind of want to give Pendrith the chance, though, because, like, yeah, he kept me 0.5 from a full cash, but I don't care. Like, I don't hold that against people at all. Like, I can't even remember half the people that screwed me on any props over the last week or so. I could care less, right? It's not their fault, right? I bet on them, right? It's my fault that they went out there and didn't hit. Taylor Pendrith at 73.5 seems like decent value. So I don't know. Let me see if there's any questions, then we can get back and figure out what we're going to do. Aberg less than 0.5 versus Batia matchup. Let me see. So he's Aubert going. You're saying you take the under there? Yeah, I got the other side, man. Also, Finau versus Cole. Let's look at that one. Finau, Cole. Yeah, those are both stayaways for me, man. If anything, I'd go Aubert over Batia. So maybe that's what you were saying, and I misinterpreted you. But I would kind of lean towards the over on that one. Aubert is just a much better player than Batia. And then that Finau Cole one, I actually think is pretty close. The reason I say that is Finau, sure, he's a higher birdie percentage player long term. He fits this golf course quite well. But Eric Cole is a really streaky putter. And if there's one thing that Eric Cole does well, is he makes a ton of birdies. He's a good iron player, a good putter. That's a lethal combination to go out there and make a bunch of birdies. That one feels pretty 50-50-ish to me. I'd still rather have Tony Finau than Eric Cole, right? Don't get me wrong, but that 0.5 makes that one a little bit sketchier. Yeah, the Aubert one, I might have a different read than you, but that's all right, right? We're not going to agree on everything. That's totally fine. All right, let's figure out what we're going to do here. So I'm going to take these top two. So that's going to be the two that we mix in here. I do like the push equity that you get on these guys at 3. Like the average even today, we go back to that, right? It was like 2.5 per round. You're going to have a solid amount of push equity at 3 with your players that are above average birdie makers. Like Sanjay, he's an above average birdie maker. And he also is a player that we've seen play well at this golf course recently. Now, different sort of conditions, but with the easier pin locations, he's the kind of guy I'll take there at 3. So that's going to be the one that we take over there on PrizePicks. For the sake of the stream slip, it'll be these two over there on the underdog side. So kind of gives us a way to mix everything in. If you'd preferred to take Hovland as opposed to Clark over here, you could obviously do that as well, or even added another slip on top of that, right? With a slip or a prop that you like over there for golf or another sport. So that's what I've got over there for the prop side of things, just to go ahead and bring that back up. This one's 2.75x, so a little bit of a better payout than you have over there in Underdog as well, which is why I've been siding a little bit more of my exposure lately over here on the PrizePicks side, especially when we have a positive stance slate like we have for tomorrow, where it's not all fades. Because if you're taking all fades for any given kind of slate, right, you'd be taking like overs on strokes, that kind of thing. So, and by the way, the payout, and the reason why you'd want to be an underdog for that is an underdog is 2.7x when you take 2 fades. It's only 2.5x over there on PrizePicks. So just make sure you do your line shopping when it comes to these slips. You always want to be taking the best payout available, which is something that you'll see me do every single time. In terms of 3-balls matchups, I don't have access to Hard Rock. They haven't posted them on a Hard Rock bet quite yet, but there are a few guys that I'm really looking for in matchups. So going to the ball striking list, all we did was go over here to bet the number and sort it by ball striking numbers. I'm really looking at Steven Yeager, a Robert McIntyre. Looks like he sets up really well for tomorrow. And same with guys like Billy Horschel and Akshay Bhatia. So to get back to that comment about Bhatia, maybe Aubert and Bhatia are a little bit closer because stat-wise, Bhatia sets up very well for tomorrow. He gained in both off the tee and on approach, and he lost 3 strokes putting. Billy Horschel gained 2.6 strokes on approach, lost 2.5 strokes putting. Same thing with McIntyre, was green across both stat categories with ball striking. And then look at that, Yeager, right? He gained nearly 3 strokes on approach and lost it all putting. These sort of players are due for some positive regression. And because they didn't play the best, I mean, like +3, +4, right? Billy Ho and Akshay both shot +3 themselves. Their odds usually on those 3-ball markets are going to be pretty good. Now, the better than usual is the best way to put it because they're quote unquote out of form. And what I like to do after 18 holes is take advantage of the overreaction because it's only been 18 holes. Conditions were really tough today, right? Like I'll give these players a pass. They went out there, they shot 3 or 4 over par, like so be it. Like it was raining sideways, it was 50 degrees, and it was 30-mile-an-hour winds. Like I'd be shooting 100 out there in those kind of conditions. Tomorrow, what I more so care about are how they were hitting the ball. And in all 4 of those cases that we just went through, right, the Yeager, McIntyres, and then the Billy Ho's and Batias, they're hitting the ball perfectly, right? Not always the same, right? Some of them are more approach heavy than it comes to the off the tee heavy, but in terms of the shots game ball striking are towards the top end of things. So to go over here to Draftkings, we will go through what they have. I won't be able to enter them myself because I won't have access, but let's see what we have for odds. So Akshay, doesn't look like they have them posted there. Let's see if they have them on Fanduel. They usually have more posted over here on the Fanduel side. So let's type in good old Akshay Bhatia. So yeah, but he doesn't have odds yet. That's kind of annoying. Who else do we have on there? Let's go. So Billy Ho and Yeager will be the next 2. Let's go Horschel. Horschel's +190 versus Siwoo and Aaron Rai. Yeah, like that's one I'd probably be betting. Let's go through Steven Yeager. Jaeger's plus 240. Oh my God. Yeah, dude. Like these are long shots. I know. Like they're not the best players in the field, but they're hitting the ball like some of the best players in the field. And then who was the last one? It was McIntyre, right? Yeah, McIntyre that we got to check on here. He is the favorite in his group against Sepp Straka and Thagala. McIntyre is probably the one I don't bet out of these because he does have two competent guys in his group like Sepp Straka, Thagala. I probably go with these top two long shots because you cash one of these two and you're well into the profit heading into the next day, right? You know, you enter these each for 1 unit a piece and you're gaining at least pretty much a unit, depending on which one hits, just under a unit profit if it's Billy Horschel that hits, let alone if both end up going out there and cashing. So I wouldn't parlay these together. Usually if I'm parlaying like 3-ball bets, it's guys that are, you know, a little bit better odds than plus 190, plus 240. But depending on the odds that you guys can get, like obviously do your line shopping on these as well. Those are the kind of players that I'm looking to tail. So let's go over here to the 3-ball bets. I just want to make sure that there's not better odds available on guys like a Horschel or a Jaeger. And I also want to check in on that other. So Horschel's at that same number. Let's look at Jaeger. He's plus 230. So actually a better number on Fanduel over there for Steven Jaeger. And then we also, I know they didn't have odds posted on Fanduel at least over there for the other one. Who was it? It was Billy Horschel, right? That we were trying to get odds for. Let me see if they have them over here. Oh, sorry, that we already went through Horschel. My bad. I'm looking at the wrong name. It was Akshay Bhatia that we wanted to look at. My apologies. I feel a little stupid for saying that. Let's go. So there's Akshay Bhatia. Also locked odds. I wonder if somebody withdrew or something, or if something's going on with a Connors, a Bhatia, or a Thompson. But that's a little bit strange, I'll admit. In fact, so strange that I'm going to refresh the sheet to see if anyone withdrew. Which I can't imagine anyone did, but yeah, nothing. Alrighty. I think that's all we got for this live stream, though, guys. So if you guys haven't already hit that like button, go ahead and do so. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything to come. And as I've already mentioned, I'm going to have plenty of more slips to enter, right? We already went over 2 that I'm going with, but over there on my Patreon page, I'm going to have a lot more that I'm adding. So make sure to check out all of that later for all the exposure that I'm getting to. But let's see if there's any last second questions to touch on. Sahith under 73.5. So yeah, I went over it a little bit earlier, but it's close to even money. I would lean under because I think the course is going to play easier than what these sports books do. But I think there are slightly better options than a Sahith. Any advantage is starting off of 1 or 10. Let me take a look at Data Golf, but I don't know that off the top of my head quite yet. Let's go. Let me refresh this so you guys can see what I'm looking at. So starting on holes 1 or 10. Nah, probably not. There's not any obvious birdie streaks. I mean, obviously we're looking at a very difficult round over there. Let's go to the Farmers. Maybe that would be a better sample size to go with. Let's go with, round number 1. So round 1, maybe the front 9, I would say. Just because, I mean, you can see here, right? This was one of the easier rounds that we had from a few weeks ago. 8, 9, and 10 looks like about the best birdie streak that you could get with something close to either side. So maybe a slight lean towards 1, but I think it's not going to make a huge impact. Like I'm not using that at all. Hey, Luke, you hope your day's going well. It is. Likewise to you. You never thought McCarty would play well in these conditions. I didn't either. And luckily we got 54 more holes to go with. So he has plenty of time to come back. And I got to say, I love Denny. He's a great kid. I've only heard great things about him. So I'm not like I'm rooting against him, but yeah, for my exposure, it'd be a good thing. Aberg versus Decky in a head-to-head. I would go Aubert over Decky. That's kind of close, though. I mean, like, Aubert's the better player between the two, but Decky won the Genesis last year. Different golf course, though. So, yeah, I would lean on Aubert. Will regret fading Hideki in Showdown. You're pivoting to Pendrith, but you got a funny feeling. You might, Phil. In fact, if you have a funny enough feeling, you might want to go out there and get back to your guy, Hideki, but I'm not going to make that decision for you. You're going to have to do so for yourself. Davis Thompson versus Bhatia in a head-to-head, for sure Bhatia. So Bhatia was one of those ball strikers that we were looking at. I love Bhatia tomorrow. And Thompson, he had a really good round himself. He gained with the ball striking, but he also putted well above his baseline today. So I would be favoring Bhatia there. Maybe a potential weather advantage tomorrow. Is there a second round leader that I like? You know, if I was going to go with the second round leader, you know, I'd want somebody that's going off super early. So let me bring up the PGA site. And let me see if there's anyone that's towards the lead going off super early, because I guess that's what you're asking about, right? Like if you think that there might be an advantage to going off early, you do that. But I honestly don't think there's an advantage tomorrow. Like, I don't know if you saw my DFS stream or you saw my weather breakdown earlier. I don't think there's an advantage when it comes to that. But if you're looking at like some of the top end of the board guys, like try and find guys within like 3-4 shots of the lead up here going off early if you're trying to do that sort of thing. But I got to admit, that's not a part of my process. I don't really see that. Do I like Batia under 73.5 or over than 3 birdies? I would prefer the over on 3 birdies. And I'm going to have to deep dive that. I'm going to have to run my projections and see what I have. But there's a good chance I get to that. Juice is bad. Would I ever run an all over on strokes? Yeah, if the conditions were for that. And the way that I would do that, man, is I'd do 2-man slips. Now, PrizePicks, it's 2.5x, so it's kind of trash. Actually, the 3x, if you do 3 fades on PrizePicks, it's 4.25x. That's usually what I do if I want to do fades on PrizePicks. But the reason why I normally do them on Underdog is PrizePicks is really quick to adjust their projections. So not only do they have the worst payouts if you do that, but they're also sharper lines makers because they will adjust to the current like averages, right? Like they won't do it right away, but after you really start to see that scoring is either really easy or really hard, they'll adjust the board a little bit. That is actually the bigger thing that makes it hard to go out there and take a bunch of fades, because a lot of my fade slips, when I'm taking just like all overs on strokes, are when we see conditions are hard. We like know for a fact that's playing like 2 or 3 over par. By the way, today was that kind of situation. I usually go to Underdog to do it because the lines will be exactly where they started at. Their lines makers are asleep on the job. I don't know if they have live traders that even pay attention to the golf board. Huge mistake if they don't. They're leaving a bunch of money on the table if they're not doing that. So that's why I like fading over there a little bit more, because they're asleep at the wheel, per se, out there with their lines. PrizePicks isn't as slow about that. So that's the one thing I'll say. Thank you for your help. You're the best. Thank you. And of course, man, I'm always willing to help out there with these streams. But that's all I've got, guys. Smash the like button if you guys haven't already. Only thing I ask out here from these streams. And I'll see you guys for the round 2 through 4 live streams out there tomorrow and the next day.